All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of What's Your Issue, episode number 3. This is the People's Weekly Comic Book Reviews podcast here on the E2KG Network. I am one of your co-hosts, Mr. Agasicles Reviews from Gearworks.com, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, and the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube. Here with my partner in crime, Mr. Steven Laura. How you doing tonight, Steven?
I'm doing good.
Good. So we are starting off late once again due to my fault. So we're just going to go ahead and get right into the nitty gritty. If you didn't know and you haven't watched the episode before, we are a spoilery reviews podcast show covering the comics that would have shipped last week, the 17th of October. So if you haven't read the issues that we're going to talk about, please step away, lower your podcasting viewport or whatever, and go read your issues and then come back. It's Monday night. We're hoping that you've read them already. We're hoping that you're pulling this down Tuesday morning, unless you're actually tuned in and listening to the live show. So, Steven, you're going to start us off this week and talk us about Luke Cage number 3.
Okay. This is a Marvel Digital original series, and this is the final one out of the series. So yeah, it's about Luke Cage. He discovers this villain that called Everyman. Is a female villain, but she uses the name Everyman. She's basically like a Robin Hood, like stealing from the rich to help the poor for health insurance. And while she's doing that, she's killing the rich. So Luke Cage is trying to stop it from happening. And she does hire Mega Red to attack Luke Cage, and Luke Cage tries to save Iron Fist because the previous issue she captured Iron Fist and started using him, and Luke Cage finds out that the villain was Everyman was she was spreading diseases from the people that were dying, the poor people that were dying. She was spreading diseases and passing on to the rich to get killed off. And Luke Cage had to stop her from doing that, and that was it. So I thought this was a very well done issue. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It was a pretty interesting storyline. I did like Luke Cage interacting with his daughter, and Everyman did give him some sort of disease, and he had like CTE, which is like some type of memory disease. And he was forgetting his daughter's name and forgetting Jessica Jones and other parts of his past. And he was getting them back, like it was going back and forth. And I thought that was pretty interesting to see that happening. And I think Everyman had a pretty interesting backstory on how she got her powers, and I think she was a mutant. They never really explain how exactly she got her powers, but she got them when she was a young child, and her father was a doctor, and she found out that she can transfer diseases to one person to another. And she also knows that she can cure disease, but it takes more power of herself to order to do that, and it doesn't always work. So it's a pretty interesting villain, and maybe I hope they do use more of her in the future. But
so now who is the talent on this issue?
Oh, I forgot to mention that. It was the writer was Anthony Del Cole, and the artist was J. Holly Lindsay.
So this is an entirely different creative team than the ones that were on the regular.
Yeah, they relaunched the series.
Okay.
It was a mini series actually.
And then only ran it 3 issues, huh?
Yeah, it's supposed to be 6 issues, but in the digital originals they put the 2 issues into one, so it's like 3. It's 3 issues for digitally, but in print it's gonna be 6 issues.
I got you.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about. So any more on that one?
Which one?
on any more stuff you want to talk about on Luke Cage?
No, that's about it.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk Aquaman number 41. So I'll let you take the lead on this one. This is one of your comments, but I also read it, so I have some input on it as well.
All right, I'll put input on it. What is it? Aquaman from number 41. The writer was Dan Abnett and the artist was Lan Medina. And this issue was the Drowned Earth tie-in. It was about it takes place after Justice League number 10, and this issue had to deal with Mira finding out what's been going on with planet Earth. She noticed that the people that were like in the ocean, or like the Atlanteans, were turning into monsters, and she was talking with Batman to get things prepared and figure out what to do, because anyone who touches the ocean turns into a sea monster, and they're trying to figure out what to do, and they lost communication with the Justice League, and Mira tries her best to stop all the monsters all the Atlanteans turning into monsters, but she ends up being the last remaining Atlantean to not turn into a monster, and she goes to meet up with Batman to see what can happen. So see what she can do, and that's how the issue ends. So I thought this was a pretty interesting story. I would give it an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed how Mira does the best of her ability to try to save the Atlanteans, and she does her best as she is a good job as being a queen, even though she doesn't think she is, but I honestly think she does a good job of it. And she did have some interesting interactions with Batman, and I liked how they worked together to try to solve this problem, even though they didn't really solve the issue. That's about it.
Yeah. So, what did you think of the costuming in here? I really like. I noticed that Lan Medina, the artist, puts her. Well, it actually maybe it's Gabe Altieb. So, yeah. Interestingly enough, I am not familiar with Medina's work, but I'm very very familiar with Vicente Cifuentes, who was on inks, and Gabe Altieb, who was on colors. So, two like top notch guys on colors. I thought it was very interesting that they put her in a two-tone costume for this issue. So the inlet of her.
Yeah, she's been wearing this new costume for a while. I mean,
okay.
Since the rebirth of Aquaman, she's been wearing it.
Okay.
But I do like it. Yeah, go ahead.
And same thing. I also rated this issue an 8.0. I was a little not fully on board with some of the dialogue, like Batman. So we're going to talk about Batman number 57 in a minute here. So first of all, it's a great week for Batman lines. Like between Justice League, Aquaman, and Batman, we got a lot of Bruce Wayne, and we got a lot of very iconic Bruce Wayne. There's a couple points in here where he says some things like when he's told that that Mira is holding back the waters of the Atlantic by sheer force of will with her aquakinetic powers. You know, Batman goes like, "Good God," and I'm just like, I don't like. Batman's not easily amazed by anything, so that just felt kind of a little off-brand. But
I think he was amazed by Amira's how powerful she is, and she is one of like the most powerful DC characters, but it's not that well known for her to be that powerful.
Right.
It's amazing about how powerful she can withstand the ocean, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I could grant that. I still felt it just felt like not very Bruce Wayne-ish, but then he does have a great line in here where Mira's like, "I made a promise to a little boy," and Batman's like, "You made a promise to me," right?
That was kind of jerkish,
right? But it like what I love about the lines that we hear from Bruce Wayne this week is they are very much Bruce Wayne in his own skin, right? They are very much,
Yeah.
I'm Batman, and I know where I fit in, and like when you make a promise to me, Superman and Wonder Woman, that's a big deal. So I love that line in this. Again, the art was pretty good. It wasn't the best. Like there's some really good art. DC killed it on art this week between Travis Moore over on Nightwing, Tony S. Daniel on Batman, and then frickin' Francis Manapul on Justice League number 10. It was a pretty incredible week. So this. The artwork in this is art that any other week might have been tops. And I don't want to take anything away from it, but it was good artwork. It just didn't kind of floor me. Again, but that's because I was looking at it in comparison to some of the artwork. And then as the issue closes out, we have Mira finally seek out Ocean Master, who they have imprisoned.
I forgot about that. I forgot about the Ocean Master.
Yeah, so yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. It's been some time since we've seen that character, so it was nice to kind of wrap things up. So you and I scored that both an 8.0. So that's interesting that we came in sync. And that. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and move on to start talking about Batman number 57. So this was the third book that I read out of my stack this week. So Batman number 57, subtitled Beasts of Burden Conclusion, which that caught me off guard. Obviously published by DC Comics. Writer, story by Tom King, art by Tony S. Daniel, one of my favorites. This issue had these weird kind of little bedtime story inserts in it, pages, depicting like an actual book that was being read to a child. That throws you for a loop a little bit as well, so we'll talk about that in a second. But that art was by Mark Buckingham and Andrew Pepoy. Colors by Tomeu Morey, who I think was also doing colors, has been doing colors on Justice League here and there, I think, and then letters by Clayton Cowles. So the situation here, so we pick up from the last page of issue number 56, where Batman has tracked down KG Beast to his cabin in Siberia or some other such northern or far western reaches of Russia, to his cabin, with the Beast having just murdered his own father, who was the last family member that the KG Beast had not killed. And then a Batman KGB fight breaks out. And that's kind of the entire setup for this issue, which is really native and very in the wild and very naturalistic in terms of just tearing down these two characters to their very basic parts. On art, Tony Daniel is doing really great stuff in this issue. I actually think this issue is a little bit better than his last, which was his first issue back on Batman after being away for a while. Last issue, it felt like he was experimenting a little, and maybe he was kind of getting back into his groove on a regular ongoing. And last issue, I mentioned that Batman, he draws Batman with these weird snow gloves that had like tatters coming off of the thing when he does this really big portrait of Bruce trudging through the snow. Again, in last issue. This week, we're talking about this a little bit on Justice League 2. It seems like all of the DC artists are struggling with how to depict heroes when they go into super cold climes. Like they have things on them, and you're like, what? Why does that guy have that on in the snow? Like cold weather should not be a problem for him. But so last issue he had him in the snow gloves, and in this issue he does it. They're kind of weird little like over gloves that go over the full length forearm gloves, it looks like. But in this issue they didn't have like the rags and tatters like he had like warm weather wraps around his hands last issue. But at any rate, point is that I feel like in this issue Daniel is dialed into his more natural style, and it just comes off beautifully. The issue barely edges out Justice League number 10 on art, which was a tough thing for me to say. I'm a huge Francis Manapul fan, and when I saw him just surprise drop in on Justice League, I was like, "Whoa, great!" And the work that I remember most that Manapul has done is he subbed in on Detective Comics a few years ago, like a few issues here and there. And then he used a darker, lower contrast art style, so it was just a much darker color palette. The one he used this week in Justice League was a little brighter, and so I preferred what Tony Daniel was doing in Batman with the darker color palette. And then Daniel just did really damn fine fight choreography. It felt like King just gave him one page in a script and said, "Have these two fight for the next 5 pages," because it felt like Daniel just kind of got to do what he wanted to do. on story. So it's a really this issue this week makes one of the most interesting creative choices that I've seen. Definitely this week, maybe overall that I've seen in a while. In that KG Beast and Batman fight, and there's no dialogue, there's no commentary between them, but you do get the grunts, and you do kind of get some kind of chuffing between the two of them, right? And it's a really interesting choice. And when I was reading it, I'm like, man, this feels really off-putting because I'm reading like these little goofy like sound effects in between panels, and I'm like, and I was like, well, why didn't he just make these silent panels? But then I was thinking, but if it's silent panels, like it isn't as realistic. And I know we're talking about realistic in terms of comic books, but if you don't have the grunting, it maybe doesn't convey the visceralness and the fight to the death motif of this fight. And I was like, well, why the grunts? And like I said, at first it was off-putting, but the fight. This fight is a fight between arguably two of the best hand-to-hand combatants in the DC universe. It's definitely, unquestionably, a fight to the death, and it's definitely big stakes. Like something. I mean, it was absolutely appropriate that something happened in this fight that has consequence. And so at the end of this fight, KGB says Bruce down on the ground. It looks like he's going to get the better of him, but Bruce fires the bat grappling hook right up into his chin and snaps his neck. So he does not killing KGB, but paralyzing him, and he's out on the ground. And then again, we get what is probably the most iconic. I feel like that whole page was the most iconic Batman page maybe ever written. But KG Beast offers him a trade and says, "Look, if you go and get help, I will tell you who hired me." And again, he refers to Nightwing as Batman's boy, as if he's his son, which it seems like the entire criminal world, as we mentioned last time we talked about Batman, it seems like the entire criminal world is convinced that Nightwing is Batman's son. Whatever. But
he is technically.
Yeah, right. But Batman tells him, I've got a 300-mile trek, to walk out of here to get you help. And then he goes, "I'm the world's greatest detective. I'll figure out who hired you. You can get your own damn help." And I'm like, man, that is like the ultimate Bruce Wayne line. Like him laying claim, because you feel like most of the time Batman just kind of, he doesn't own that title, the world's greatest detective. It's just like he knows it's something people say about him, but it's not what he thinks about himself. So it was awesome to hear him say it, and it felt so powerful for him to say it about himself, and then just to walk off and leave KG Beast there. I thought it was one of the great conclusions to a story. And then we closed the story out by then you pulling the camera back, and the whole time I thought, because the children's story that's being read is a children's story by a Russian author, I thought it was a story of the KGB's father reading him a story. It's actually Thomas Wayne reading Bruce a story. I scored this issue a 9.0 out of 10, which is incredibly high for me. Very few issues do I rate that highly. I felt like the creative team earned the ending to the story every step of the way, and I felt like the readership that's been on Batman, that is stuck with Batman, because I'm sure lots of people fell off in the run up to the wedding, and more fell off after the wedding. If you've stuck with Batman, I feel like this is a big payoff. It's brutal, violent, angry. We also see Bruce's expertise as cunning, and kind of that way that Batman has patiently won a fight and mapped it out in his head before his enemy has ever thrown the first punch. It's a new status quo, which is kind of weird after just 2 issues. And that's the only thing that kind of concerns me. And I'm like, so how long is it going to take him to track down Nightwing's, whoever contracted the hit out on Nightwing? Are we going to resolve that right away? Are they going to let it linger for a while? I'm actually okay with where we are right now with that marinating for like a 6-issue arc about something else and then coming back to it. It was just really weird that it's a 2-issue subtitle arc. And it also makes me wonder that Daniel isn't staying on it, and it's just has just done these 2 issues, and then won't be on that, from here on out. So like I said, the whole thing is an interesting choice all around. And I can't say that it won't work. I'm sure some people will go, well, he should have resolved this issue. But whatever, needless to say, I'm in it for the long haul. So, did you read this issue, Stephen?
Yeah, I did read it. I really did enjoy it this time around, and I did like the last issue as well. And there's one interesting thing I noticed that I did like that Tom King decided to borrow some influence from the Arrow TV show because they have KGBs, but he's different. He's like a mob boss. I noticed that version of KGBs is a father in that storyline with Tom King. He's a father. He made him as a father at KGBs. That version of KGBs.
Wait, in the comic or on the show?
No, in the comic, he decided to make that the mob version of KGB that's an Arrow. He decided to make them as his father in the book.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting that KGB is his father in the comic.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So on the show, the KGBs that you see is the father that's in the comic.
Yeah, gotcha. Like he took that version of KGB's and turned into his father.
Okay.
Yeah, because the KGB's in Arrow, he's a mob boss. He's not like what's in the comic books.
Okay. Right.
Gotcha. You have a different take on him.
Very cool. So, how about Justice League Dark #4?
All right, I'll talk about that. Justice League Dark #4 was written by James Tynion the fourth, and the artist was Alvaro Martinez Bueno. And I thought this was a really well done issue. I've been liking The Witching Hour. It's been a very exciting storyline. It's been crossing over with Justice League Dark and Wonder Woman, and I really like the mythology that the witches are giving to the dark universe of the Justice League world. And in this issue, the witches are like controlling a specific hero, and her name is Montu Dawn. It's like some Native American hero I never heard of. And I'm not sure, she's probably a new character, but the witches are like mind controlling her, and she's fighting the Justice League Dark. And Wonder Woman has the ability to she figures out how to control the witching powers that the witches gave her, and they weren't able to mind control her. Like, her will was pretty strong, and the Justice League Dark end up escaping, and they left Wonder Woman to fight off the witches, and Zatanna and Constantine end up staying, and they find out that the witches eventually break control of Wonder Woman, and actually at the end of the issue they get to mind control her. So Zatanna and Constantine has to probably fight Wonder Woman at the next issue. And I also found some interesting thing about, because Swamp Thing does try to control what's been going on with the witches fighting, and he finds out that Black Orchid is being mind controlled by the witches. And they also did save Deadman and his I forgot what's her name, but the person that gave him the powers of Deadman. So, yeah, they was able to save her and get all the monks that were living in there and escape whatever not that part bad. That's what it was. Yeah. So I thought this was very well done issue, and I did like the interactions with the Justice League characters, and there's great mythology with this witching stuff. So yeah, I would give it a 8 out of 10 as well. Yeah, that's it.
Very cool. So, last 2 issues in the review segment. Rivers of London, Action at a Distance, number 1, Chapter 1, subtitle Chapter 1, Secret Weapon, published by Titan Comics. Written by Andrew Cartmel, art by Brian Williamson, colors by Stefani Renee. I'm not familiar with anybody on this creative team. Maybe Brian Williamson. I've seen his stuff before. I'm not absolutely positive. So the situation is, it's really kind of cool. This is an alternate history comic that spins a tale of wizards that are woven into everyday life in Great Britain. Their military operations flashbacks to World War II, with then later events showcasing the wizarding characters as cops, which again is kind of neat. Main character is a Thomas Nightingale, who heads up a spec ops unit that covertly operates from a rather mundane brickfront townhouse in London. But inside, he's teaching his protege Peter Grant the ropes of being a wizarding cop. The comic opens up with Thomas needing to go away to attend the funeral of an old friend, and when he departs to attend the funeral, he tells Peter to go ahead and take license to go through all of his old records and see and review some of the old cases that the two worked together. So Peter begins reading and starts to uncover this interesting tale of his teacher. So the story. So I love this kind of stuff. I love things that take fantastic elements and intermix them with alternative history that's somewhat based on actual events, but is intermixed with these notations of fiction, and then combines it with mundane but grounded, actual things that occurred with a slight spin. There's like a novel series that I read. I don't read it very quickly, called like the Temeraire series, I think, which is kind of like this wild spin of like what if kind of Britain and France had dragons during the Napoleonic Wars. So that kind of stuff like really kind of appeals to me. So it's a great setup that's right in my wheelhouse. Like I said, it's alternative history which complements my love of actual history. I was a history major in undergrad, and mixes it with that fantasy element, but then grounding it in a real world problem. Like I said, I could eat that stuff up all day. So it's a weird mixture in how it gets to me, because I have to say that I think that part of the craft in this issue is not overdoing it as far as Cartmel's writing. This concerns a series. This concerns the secondary character who is the one who's in the casket in the funeral. I think the guy's name is Spinell or Spinall, something like that. And he became a cop after the war. And was investigating a former Nazi who had then emigrated to Great Britain and was kind of protected by the intelligence services because he was of value. But this guy was a serial killer. And the other character was chasing him down. But again, in terms of the not overdoing it, right, the murder scenes are not overly grotesque in their depiction. But you have this former Nazi living in a protected status in Great Britain doing evil things. That, to me, is kind of a great villain setup, the untouchable villain. So Cartmel doesn't try to do anything overly fancy. It's just a good old-fashioned whodunit murder mystery set in post-World War II Britain. Practically writes itself. It could definitely be screwed up. That setup could definitely be screwed up by someone over-embellishing the setup. Nightingale is an enjoyable character because he's not overly egotistical, which to me would have come off as tropish. He's not Sherlock Holmes. He's not Doctor Strange. He's not this super introverted, Asperger-y kind of character. Not even when I read through the setup, I kind of thought like, oh, this feels like a little bit like Dresden, if you've ever read any of the Dresden Files. But he's not even as arrogant as Dresden is. So there's a storyline put together with a careful touch, and it's much more procedural homicide than wizarding. And I kind of feel like these guys are doing what Marvel has done with the movies, because I feel like the best MCU movies are the ones that are like a solid standard Hollywood storyline, plot line, and then they layer the superhero stuff on top of it. But if you yank the superhero stuff off, like Ant-Man would still be a great heist movie, even if you took the superhero stuff off. Winter Soldier would still be a great spy movie if you took all the superhero stuff out. So like I said, they kind of follow that template of putting together a solid plot line and then put the superhero, or in this case, the fantasy stuff on top of it. On art, Williamson does a fine enough job. Like I said, again, it's really unfair in this week. This was the second book I read. I read it after reading Justice League number 10, which has Francis Manapul on art. And that's just kind of unfair to have to follow that up. So this book just kind of comes out in a week where it's an unfortunate luck of the draw when like DC's just seemingly pulled out all the big guns on art in 1 week. Good conveyance of like the horror-y kind of Halloween kind of setup. You can definitely tell that the maid is creepy as all hell in the covert ops mansion. And I will say what I really like about Williamson's art is, again, no offense, but in a book full of Caucasian people, you can actually tell who aren't in costumes. You can actually tell everyone apart. Like Nightingale and Stralin are clearly of different heights and builds and have distinctive features. Nightingale has a dash of has a gray streak in his hair, and the murder victim women are all of like different builds and heights. So it's solid work, if not necessarily run-defining craft. I gave this book a 7.0 out of 10. It's a solid action mystery comic that hits upon several notes in genre comics that could wind up appealing to a wide array of fans. You got magic types for your Potter people, mystery lovers, crime comic fans, war buffs. There's a lot to like in here. The book does a good job of hooking you in and making you want to read the next issue to see how the case continues to unfold. It's not super powerful or hard-hitting. It doesn't hit you over the head, but it's that solid kind of book that you like, kind of in the middle of your stack, that you can count on to deliver something consistent in the next issue that you will enjoy. I don't know if I'm going to read the follow-up issue to this. I'm actually so I had a slot open up in my regular polls this week because Millennium, the Girl Who Danced with Death, wrapped up with this third issue, which I also read this week. I am actually going to replace it with Nightwing, and we'll talk about Nightwing a little bit later. So last comic in the review segment is Justice League number 10, subtitled Drowned Earth Prelude, published by DC Comics. Story by Scott Snyder, art by the great Francis Manapul. And when I say art, Manapul does his pencils and does colors. I don't know if he inks it, but he's doing the whole thing. So we open up with Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and right off the bat we get Firestorm. And so this is the thing that I really like that Snyder is doing is he's really bringing these favorite like Justice League characters who we may not have seen in a while and squarely getting them in a story. I love it. Firestorm is one of my favorite characters. He was at a height in the 80s when I got into comics. Love it. So again, we get there's kind of some weird stuff in the opening. Like I don't understand why Wonder Woman has snow leggings on because they're in the Arctic Circle. I'm like, does Wonder Woman get cold? Like I don't know.
Weird.
Aquaman has like furry boots on, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure Arthur Curry should be able to march through the Antarctic without furry boots on. But fine, whatever. It's a chance to play, and I guess that's what it was for Manapul. So fine. But again, like I said, all over DC comic book characters are in wintry scenes, and like they've got like all this extra stuff on. And I'm like, huh? So at any rate, again, another thing that I like that Snyder's doing is he's doing my favorite Justice League shtick, which is squads. So you get Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Firestorm, which is this weird but really cool mixture. We're getting a lot of Aquaman and Diana, which I think is neat. But then in other scenes, you get Superman, The Flash, and Adam Strange, which is a neat mixture. And then you get what to me is kind of one of the classic Justice League Unlimited squads from the cartoon. You get Green Lantern John Stewart, Hawkwoman, and Gian Jones. So I thought those were some neat kind of setups and trios that you got to see with their own little dynamics. So at any rate, Poseidon is missing, presumed dead, I guess. Maybe they know, maybe they are not sure. Something has led them to the Arctic Circle, and they are searching for an ancient lost ship. Which has, lost ship was such a secret to maybe something Poseidon was putzing around with or a message he left for them. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So they find this thing, and it's not what they expected. Along the way, we get shots of, like I said, other jail squads. So on story, solid story. This is the kind of thing that you expect from a Justice League book. It's a big, world-menacing, dimension-like crossing threat kind of stuff. Because the League shouldn't be worried about things like crooks knocking over banks, unless it's a villain that's specifically on the rogues list, right? Crooks knocking over banks in Metropolis, that's not a Justice League thing. Gorilla Grodd knocking over a bank in Metropolis, maybe they check that out because they think Grodd's up to something bigger. But at any rate, this is another big epic story right on the heels of the whole Source Wall thing. The only thing I ask is, yeah, they shouldn't be concerned about knocking over banks, but we're getting a lot of really big, almost event level kind of stuff in Justice League. And I just wonder, how many of those arcs do you string together before you do something like a personal story or a more character driven story? So it's just a heavy lift the way they're approaching it now. They're into their 10th issue on this run of big epic stories, and some part of me feels like, yeah, maybe you should take a break coming up here soon, especially for a book that's double shipping. But at any rate, this is on brand. I like to focus on the squads, and I feel like this is how you get to the heart of the league, which is all these little tiny relationships, which is I felt like when they did the Justice League movie, I felt like that's what the Justice League movie should have been about, is those little relationships between like pairs and trios of characters, not like the whole big group. But at any rate, again, it's neat because you see it's almost like a what if or like a Marvel 2-in-1 or Marvel team up is what I'm thinking, is where you get like these characters that sometimes you see them together a lot, sometimes you don't. And like I said, we're getting to see a lot of Diana and Arthur. There's some neat things here with Batman still being in the full body cast. And it's also interesting. So that's in continuity with what's going on in Aquaman because it's a Drowned Earth tie-in. But of course, in the Bat books, like he's not in a full body cast and it's business as usual. So, but again, this is DC after like the post Rebirth DC giving creative teams license to tell great stories and giving them license to sometimes be outside of concurrent continuity, which I think is fine. So this is all the stuff that Justice League books are made of. Now, that being said, this is what they did in the first arc, and those books consistently scored a 7.5 with me. So what is it about this book that lifts it out above the mundane? Because again, an 8.0 for me is like a remarkable book that people should sit up and take notice of. What tips us over the edge is Francis Manapul's art. Now, I think the other artist Ramirez and some of the other artists that have been on, they've done good work, but Manapul's art is just this is Frank Quietly level, Alex Ross level stuff. It's something that is beyond the norm and I feel needs to be appreciated. I don't even think this is Manapul's best work. Like I said, the Tony Daniels stuff in Batman number 57, I felt like edged him. But man, this is still like a very special issue. Again, he's not using the heavier, darker colors, which kind of made it less appealing to me. And I mentioned I felt like the best stuff I read of his was in Detective Comics. This is still great. Panel work is exquisite. There are no 2 pages in the book that have the same panel layout. And I would hold to that claim because I actually flipped back through to try and test that theory. And I couldn't find 2 pages that were exactly the same in panel layout. I love the one where he has Arthur waking up out of the darkness after they go to this other dimension with the triumvirate of Sea Lords. And they've knocked Arthur out and he's waking up, and it kind of progressively peels back the stages of his consciousness in these horizontal panels, which is just awesome. Level of the detail on the pages with the triumvirate is great. If you look at it, it's markedly greater detail than you see on the other pages. I don't know how many issues they've got Manapul on this book. I don't know that he's a guy who can do like a lengthy run with the style that he does. I think the style that he does takes more time. So you can see, and I think you can see on these pages, he does his regular shtick level of detail, but the other pages aren't so much. And I felt like that was him being pressed for time and under a schedule and not able to do it. When he did Detective, everything was super detailed, but he was just dropping in and subbing in for an issue here and there. So I think that to me was the difference. That might bode well because I would love to see him on a number of issues for Justice League, but I just don't know, how long he's going to be on. I scored this book an 8.5 out of 10. It's just beautifully put together. I hope that one day we get to see Snyder and Manapul do kind of a one-shot big story in graphic novel format. I asked him if he and Manapul had done anything like that on Twitter. He mentioned that they had done Justice League No Justice, which is now in graphic novel trade paperback format. So I will go check that out. Not quite the same as a full length. I'm thinking something like The Dark Knight, like one big, 60-something page story. But fine, I'll go check this out. I didn't know that they had worked together and done a large body of work.
Francis Manapul also did The Flash with Brian Bucciolato.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And the New 52 when it first started.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he did Dark Side War as well.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So anyway, this issue to me was a lot of great stuff. Needless to say, this is the kind of issue that makes me love the fact that Justice League is currently in my regular recurring monthly pulls. It's been a long time since I've wanted to have Justice League in that stable, and a long time since even when I had it in the stable, I really feel like this is the book that kind of anchors the rest of my stack. So great issue. Did you read this, Stephen?
Yeah, I did read this issue. I had to because it was connecting with Aquaman, the John Earth event, and I did enjoy this issue. I wasn't really expecting Firestorm to be there. Because the last time I saw Firestorm was in like a Legends of Tomorrow miniseries, and yeah, I didn't. I that was like a year ago, and I wasn't expecting to see Firestorm here. And it was pretty cool to see Adam Strange as well, because Adam Strange hasn't been used in a while, and I didn't think I was gonna see him here. So yeah, I really like the interactions with the Justice League characters, and Francis Manapul's art was beautiful on this book. I did notice the light colors. It was more light colors than dark.
Right. Yeah, and it's and like when I first saw Firestorm, I was like, wait, is this Ronnie or is this the other guy? And
I think it's Ronnie and Jason. Okay. Yeah.
Well, but the thing is, like, I love the way that Snyder wrote it because it didn't matter. It's Firestorm, right? Like, he didn't make it.
He didn't. You can't really tell if it's supposed to be Ronnie talking or Jason talking.
Right. So cool beans. So the best thing you read this week, Stephen, was what?
It was number 2 by Brian Michael Bendis, and the artist is David Mack.
So this is Bendis's like writer owned or writer initiated imprint label under DC.
Yeah, it's Jinx World. Yeah, it's his own. It's like an indie book. I would consider it as.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure to consider it indie if it's on DC. But
right.
It feels that way.
So what was it about this book that made it the best thing you read this week?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I wasn't sure about the first issue, but the second issue really hit me pretty hard because it was, it was really suspenseful, and it's about some comic book artist that he meets this girl in the comic book convention that loved his art, and the woman decides to invite him to go see the president of Istanbul from Turkey, and what is it? So yeah, he goes to Istanbul to meet the president, and they were in a taxi when he meets the girl that saw him in the comic convention, she gives him this painting, this type of like item that's he's supposed to give to the president as a gift, and she gave, even though she gave him the gift, he's supposed to pretend that he gives the gift to the president instead of the woman that he met, and he ends up giving the gift to the president. And there's also a story that there's also a investigation going on that takes place after the it takes place way in the future of the story, and he's getting beat up by some guy that's investigating on what was in that item that was given to the president, and what was that girl that he met in the comic convention. And it's pretty interesting story. It's like some, I don't know, it's like some spy story that's going on, and it's pretty interesting. I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the story, and I do like that this is something that's not very superhero, and it's a different feel to that, and I think that's pretty interesting. And the art is pretty well done. I really like the watercolor in the art.
All right. Very cool. The best thing that I read this week was Batman number 57, which we've already talked about in lengthy detail. So no need to revisit that. My honorable mentions this week. So these are my books that I would have rated an 8.0 or above. Were Justice League number 10, Aquaman number 41, and Nightwing number 51. And obviously, Batman number 57 was the best thing. So these are the books outside of the best thing that we read this week that we would have also scored very highly. Like I said, on Aquaman, I really like the story that was put together and the interaction between Mira and Bruce. And then on Nightwing, I really just like overall how that story is coming together. A good artwork, some great scenes with Alfred in there, and then Dick or Rick, depending on what you ascribe to. Dick kind of at the end, as somebody tries to mug him, just kind of instinct taking over, and him just completely putting the smackdown on the guy, and then that causing Dick to wonder about who he should be. He's been trying to kind of go through life and slough off any sense of responsibility. But it looks like that may be changing. And at the end, we have a cop assuming the mantle of Nightwing, which felt a little very much Joseph Gordon-Levitt at the end of The Dark Knight Returns. So there we have it. That is a book that I'm going to be adding to my recurring pull list, by the way, from here on out. So thank you very much, Stephen, because the whole reason I read that issue was because it was also in your pull list. Your honorable mentions this week?
It's my honorable mentions is The Life of Captain Marvel number 4, Old Man Logan number 49, and Mr. and Mrs. X number 4. That's pretty much it.
So how is Mr. and Mrs. X going? I dropped in and checked out, I think, issue number 2, which had Deadpool in it. Being that there is such a hatred for Gambit around comic book fans, it was kind of a very interesting choice to do. It's like people love Rogue, they can't stand Gambit. So
I actually like Gambit and Rogue. I don't know why there's any hate for Gambit. I thought people loved him since the X-Men cartoon.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think in the movies and in the comics, he's just come off as such of like so much kind of like a dude bro that I don't know. So, but it's been. So last I saw, they were out in space. Are they still out Star Trek?
Yeah, they're still out in space with Shi'ar.
Okay.
And interacting with Professor X's daughter.
Okay. All right. Very cool. So what are you pulling next week, man? As we get ready to wrap up and get out of here.
I'm gonna be pulling Moon Knight number 200, which I'm gonna be reviewing because it's the final issue of the series. There's Action Comics 1004, Wonder Woman 57, Titans number 28, Spider-Geddon number 2, and Justice League Odyssey number 2.
Okay, well, you'll definitely have to let me know how Justice League Odyssey number 2 goes, since I read the first two, but decided not to read the second one. I am going to be pulling The Punisher number 3. I will also be reading Wonder Woman number 57. I'm going to read Old Lady Harley number 1, which I'm kind of gritting my teeth about because I know you're a fan of them, but I've never particularly gotten on board with like the Old Man Logan thing. And then when they did, but I was okay with it when it was just that one. And now they do Old Man Hawkeye. And now it seems like DC, I'm almost wondering if this is like a pun or like a chip shot at Marvel with Old Lady Harley.
It probably is a cheap shot.
So I'm kind of not looking forward to that one, but I'll check it out. I'm also going to read Moon Knight number 200, and I'm going to read The Sentry number 5 because I heard that has actually been getting better, good, and that the Sentry maybe is being converted into a character that's not just a thing for you to loathe. From your poll list, I elected that I'm going to read Titans number 28. And I'm going to read Spider-Geddon number 2. Now, one of the things I read this week that I didn't talk about was Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man number 311, which unfortunately is a new creative team following the departure of Chip Zdarsky, which I was very impressed by Zdarsky's work on Spectacular. This sticking on a book after a creative team transition 50% of the time leads to some wailing and gnashing of teeth. I will say, if you're going to do that, the way to do it for me is to give me my favorite Spider-Man villain, which is Morlun. feaster of spiders, of the spider totem or whatever. So I really enjoyed that issue, but I've never been interested in this whole Spider-Verse, Spider-Geddon, Spider-Man family, like the Bat family, like rendition, like Marvel's version of the Bat family. But I will do a drop-in and check out Spider-Geddon #2 just to kind of kick around, just to potentially kick that around with you. So anything else that you want to talk about this week in the world of comics?
Oh, this I think that Century. I think Century #5 is supposed to be the final issue of that series. I heard it got canceled
really?
quickly.
Wow.
And that's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, lots of
I was getting interested in it. And I don't know, it just didn't sell well.
Just when it got good, right? And unfortunately, this is like a lot of final issues this week. Luke Cage #3, and then Moon Knight #200, unfortunately, which I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that character. It would be weird if they would shelve him, but they may be doing the immediate turnaround reboot like they did with Punisher. So it should be an interesting week next week. This week I was very DC heavy, but like I said, DC also killed it. My own stack next week is probably DC heavy again. Maybe it's a little more balanced. So nothing from the indies or the tier 2 or tier 3 pubs next week, which is a little interesting for me. But we'll be back here to kick comics with you, the listeners and viewers out there, as we try to do every week. Thanks so much for anybody who happened to swing by and check in on the live show. I did not look to see who checked in on the live show because I don't have chat enabled for tonight. So if you have any comments or any feedback for us, just drop them on the YouTube video or give us a shout out on Twitter and ask your questions. Otherwise, on behalf of Gearworks.com, the E2KG Network podcasting channel, and the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube, and my co-host, Stephen Laura. My name has been Agasicles Reviews. This has been What's Your Issue, episode #3, counting down the comic books that shipped the shipping week of Wednesday, October 17th. We will be back here next week to cover the books that ship October 24th next week. Thanks once again. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, happy hunting and stay safe out there. We're out.
All right.